Donahue knew that you did not get one shot going straight through and one shot that explodes from the same gun and the same ammunition. According to the autopsy report, the entrance wound's diameter is 6 millimeters, and the bullet tunnels for 15 millimeters before fragmenting. Donahue drills a hole, exactly the same size as the entrance wound recorded at the autopsy. If the shot had come from Oswald's Carcano rifle, the entrance wound in JFK's skull would have to be at least the diameter of the bullet, or bigger. But the entrance wound is only 6 millimeters in diameter. Therefore, it's simply impossible for a 6.5 millimeter Carcano bullet to have impacted JFK's skull. But if the third shot could not have come from Lee Harvey Oswald's rifle, why were 3 shell casings found at his sniper perch?
The advocates of the lone gunman theory will always mention the 3 spent casings that were found in Oswald's perch. One of them was away from the other 2, and Howard Donahue explains the single one perfectly. It was dented and probably used as a chamber plug. That is to stop moisture and grit from getting into the chamber.
The dented casing was found several feet from the other 2 casings. Perhaps Oswald ejected this chamber plug before firing the first 2 shots from the window. So if the third and fatal headshot didn't come from Lee Harvey Oswald's rifle, where did it come from? The Warren Commission calculated that the headshot came down at a declination of just under 16 degrees.
The trajectory from the book depository was 16 degrees down and about 6 degrees right to left, based on the midline of the vehicle.
Bonar Menninger is a Kansas-based journalist who chronicled Howard Donahue's search to uncover what happened in Dallas.
Even if the entrance wound and Oswald's position lined up, that right to left trajectory would have suggested that the exit wound would have been somewhere in his left side of his face, maybe his forehead, his nose, and not the upper right portion of his skull.
Donahue decides to conduct his own trajectory tests. He uses the Warren Commission's autopsy exhibits to determine the bullet's entrance and exit points. He drills the exit hole and hopes to trace the line of trajectory back to its source. Donahue slides a dowel through the skull to line up the trajectory with the position of President Kennedy's head at the time of the third shot.
Howard couldn't believe it, that it was absolutely impossible for the trajectory from Oswald's sniper position to have caused the wound that Kennedy suffered in his head. Didn't make sense.
It looks like the Warren Commission's lone gunman theory is wrong. Seeking answers, Donahue meets pathologist Dr. Russell Fisher. Fisher has been appointed by the Attorney General to re-examine JFK's autopsy, and he reveals startling new information about the president's head wound.
Dr. Fisher told him that the entrance wound was mislocated.
It's much higher, maybe 4 inches in this area here, perhaps here.
Higher. Huh.
At the autopsy in Bethesda, it was down here by the occipital protuberance, which is that bony bump on the back of your skull, but in fact, Dr. Fisher's panel found that it was 4 inches higher. It's at an inch to the right of the midline.
A big difference.
Armed with this new information, Donahue can now trace back the trajectory of the fatal shot based on the entrance wound's correct location. What he discovers comes as a complete surprise. On his drawings, he traces that trajectory back. He's shocked to discover it goes over the left rear seat of the Secret Service agent's follow-up car, close behind the presidential limousine. Could the fatal shot have been fired by an agent? Donahue writes to the Secret Service and asks for the names of the agents who rode in the follow-up car, what weapons they carry, and what caliber those weapons are. The Secret Service replies that they do not disclose the types of weapons they use, other than that agents are issued .38 caliber revolvers. The letter adds that Secret Service agents fired no shots at the time of the assassination. But Colin McLaren discovers witnesses who contradict the Secret Service.
There is 10 witnesses that claim to have smelled gunpowder at the time of the shooting at street level.
Dallas patrolman Earl Brown is standing on a railway bridge, looking down at the motorcade as it races to Parkland Hospital.
I heard those shots and then I smelled this gunpowder. Oh, I'd say a couple minutes later or so.
Dallas Mayor Earl Cabell and his wife Elizabeth are sitting in a convertible 4 cars back from the presidential limousine.
I was acutely aware of an odor of gunpowder.
With the wind at 15 miles per hour from the southwest, that gunpowder couldn't have come from the 6th floor window, not with the wind blowing in Lee Harvey Oswald's face.
To Colin McLaren, the testimonies from witnesses who smelled gunpowder at street level are strong evidence of a second shooter. One of these witnesses was Senator Ralph Yarborough, riding with Vice President Lyndon Johnson in an open Lincoln, directly behind the Secret Service follow-up car.
I've hunted all my life, and I've handled all kinds of weapons in the Army. I knew they were rifle shots, and there were 3 of them. A second or 2 later, I smelled gunpowder. I always found that strange, because being familiar with firearms, I could never see how I could smell the powder from a rifle in that high building. You don't smell gunpowder unless it blows in your face.
If a second weapon was fired, whose was it? After the shooting, police gather several dozen witnesses, many claiming to have seen it.
The Dallas Sheriff's Office found the best type of witness, those that saw something on the day and were prepared to make statements before they could be corrupted from outside influences.
I heard at least 2 shots fired.
22-year-old Hugh Betzner is standing alongside the motorcade taking photographs.
I also saw a man in either the president's car or the car behind his pull out what looked like a rifle.
Hugh Betzner is just one of the people to see a gun at the scene. McLaren discovers that there are others. Senator Ralph Yarborough is in the motorcade. He also says that he saw a Secret Service agent pull out a rifle.
I heard 3 shots, no more. All seemed to come from the right rear. Some of the Secret Service men looked backward and to the right, in the general direction for where the explosion seemed to come from. One Secret Service man sitting down in the car ahead of us pulled out an automatic weapon or rifle, and he looked backward.
Dallas Mayor Earl Cabell is traveling in a convertible 4 cars behind the presidential limousine.
We could tell, of course, that there was confusion in the presidential car. Activity. The Secret Service men ran to that car. From out of nowhere appeared one Secret Service man with a submachine gun. His attention seemed to be focused up toward the building.
Even Secret Service agent Winston Lawson testifies that he saw a fellow agent holding a rifle.
But I also noticed, right after the reports, an agent standing up with an automatic weapon in his hand. And the first thing that flashed through my mind was that he had fired, because this was the only weapon I'd seen up to that point.
Just one camera captures an agent inside the Secret Service follow-up car with an assault rifle in his hands. What Howard Donahue now suspects is that the second shooter has been hidden in plain sight all along. But who is the agent? And why would he shoot the president? Howard Donahue concluded that the Warren Commission's lone gunman theory was wrong. There had to be a second shooter in Dealey Plaza. His ballistic tests traced the kill shot back to the Secret Service car behind the presidential limousine. Colin McLaren also found several witnesses who smelled gunpowder at street level and saw an agent brandishing a rifle. In the days immediately after the assassination, the Secret Service agents are ordered to write statements about their actions that day, including George Hickey.
The last shot seemed to hit his head and cause noise at the point of impact, which made him fall forward and to his left again. At the end of the last shot, I reached to the bottom of the car and picked up the AR-15 rifle, cocked and loaded it, and stood partway up in the car and looked about. At this point, the cars were passing under the overpass.
George Hickey's version of what happened is interesting. He claims that he had hold of the AR-15 just as they were going underneath the underpass. Yet, you've got 11 different witnesses who gave testimony that say very clearly he had hold of the weapon at the time of the third shot. That is, of course, back on Dealey Plaza. Interestingly again is, of those 11, 7 of them are Secret Service agents.
Agent Winston Lawson rides in front of the president, in the lead car. He gives a sworn statement about what he saw.
I noticed Agent Hickey standing up in the follow-up car with the automatic weapon. I first thought he fired at someone.
Agent Roy Kellerman, in his Warren Commission testimony, confirms that weapon is in the motorcade.
We have an AR-15. It's out of its case. It won't be shown. It could be laying on the floor, but she is ready to go.
Ready to go means that the assault weapon is cocked, loaded, one up the spout, and safety on. In the case of George Hickey, all he would have had to have done was flip the safety, point and shoot.
But that's not what Agent Hickey claims in his written statement.
I reached to the bottom of the car and picked up the AR-15 rifle, cocked and loaded it, and stood partway up in the car and looked about.
Why did Hickey say he cocked and loaded the AR-15 when Kellerman testifies it was ready to go? Earl Warren confronts Secret Service Chief James Rowley about the use of assault rifles in the motorcade.
As you go along in the motorcade, you have men who are scanning the buildings along the route, don't you?
Yes, sir.
And they have submachine guns in one of their cars?
No.
Warren knows from other testimony that this is not true.
For security reasons, I'd like to...
Rowley evades the question.
We have no machine guns now.
So here we have a situation where the latest weapon in the Secret Service arsenal, the AR-15, is withdrawn immediately after.
To try to understand the Secret Service's actions, Colin McLaren retraces their steps leading up to the assassination.
The Secret Service agents put JFK to bed just after midnight, and then for some strange reason they went bar hopping, and they were seen to be in the company of scantily clad women, as the Warren Commission called it, strippers in other words. And the drinking went on till just after 5 a.m. before they went back to their rooms to prepare themselves for a 7 a.m. start.
Agent George Hickey, whose primary role was as a driver, was already in Dallas preparing the cars for the motorcade.
He in fact was gazetted or attached to the garage, that is to polish the cars, check the oil and water and prepare it for the president and the motorcade.
George Hickey was not in the bar getting drunk the night before.
And that had to have been the reason for George Hickey, who was at that stage just a driver, to have to step up, take the AR-15 and take the sniper role on the follow-up car, a set of responsibilities totally foreign to him.
Now McLaren examines the behaviour of the Secret Service at Parkland Hospital, directly after the shooting. The lead car, the President's limousine, and the Secret Service follow-up car arrive at Parkland at 12:36 p.m., 6 minutes after the 3 shots were fired. Senator Ralph Yarborough is among those in this bloody motorcade.
I walked up to the car where Mrs. Kennedy was still there on the back seat, lying there with her head bowed over, covering her husband's head, his blood running down her leg and on her clothes, and twice saying, "They've murdered my husband. They've murdered my husband." It's the most tragic sight of my life.
Texas law requires an autopsy to be performed before the body can be shipped out of the state. Dr. Earl Rose is the Dallas County Medical Examiner.
The body cannot leave this hospital until after an autopsy has been performed.
Now, this is the body of the President of the United States, and we're going to take it back to Washington.
You are not taking him anywhere. There's a law here, and we are going to enforce it. You cannot lose the chain of evidence.
My friend, that part of the law can be waived. Now, either you move, or we run it over you.